This is Anarchast.
Hola amigos, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. We have coming in from Madrid, Spain, David Howden. He's the chair and division of business and economics at the St. Louis University in Madrid. He's originally from Canada and he's been out in Spain for the last 6 months. And he's joining us today from Madrid. How are you, David?
Hi, Jeff. Great. How's it going?
It's going good, eh? We get to speak many different languages here. I can use my Canadian accent and we can speak a little Spanish.
Yeah, maybe we'll stay away from speaking Canadian so we don't confuse people.
Yeah, it's not all about Canada, eh?
Yeah.
So first question I always ask everyone is, how did you become an anarchist?
Well, I think it actually happened quickly enough with me. It was more just when I was an undergrad, mostly taking econ classes and thinking about life and what else are you doing when you're an undergrad, and really starting to question the status quo or the state of affairs that we had. And in particular, I think really where it happened to me first, and then I moved from there, was I started looking at money. Money is probably one of the unique facets of the economy because it's the last aspect which is wholly socialized, and the one that nobody questions as being wholly socialized. So I started looking at that and asking questions why, and then one thing just led to another, tumbled down from there.
Wow, and you ended up at the St. Louis University where Jesus Huerta de Soto is, and I believe that's the main reason you went out there, is to study economics with him. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually in about 6 years now. I'm trying to think, it's been so long. About 6 years ago, I really got interested in it, and Jesus Huerta de Soto here in Madrid, he's the resident Austrian Economics expert on money. So I decided I wanted to come out here and study with him, so I moved to Spain, to Madrid, to do my PhD. Mainly, like I say, to study with him and to learn firsthand his own thoughts on the matter. And then life's pretty good out here, so despite what you read in the paper or see on the news, it's not all burning cars and riots.
Yeah, it's the exact same in Mexico. I hear it all the time. Are you sure? You safe there? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's pretty safe here. Turn off your TV, please.
Yeah, that's right.
You've been programmed. But let's talk about that for a second, because I am curious about it. What is going on in the Eurozone, in your opinion, from an Austrian perspective?
Well, the crisis,
or in Spain specifically as well.
Yeah, I suppose when you turn on the TV and you see all the rioting, like you say with Mexico, it's not indicative of the actual situation on the ground, and people aren't fearful for their lives or anything like that. Not to say the situation is rosy, but it's not as terrible as the news would lead you to believe. But I think when you look in Spain, you've got two crises going on at the same time, or at least two problems that are causing the crisis at the same time. Now, on the one level, you've got, in the Eurozone, you have 17 countries that are all sharing the same currency, the euro. And involved with that, you've got some highly productive countries like Germany, and then you've got some less productive countries like Italy, Spain, or Greece. And everybody uses a currency that's got the same value. So, of course, if all your prices are denominated in the same money, you're going to have a little bit of a disconnect where goods are really cheap up in Germany and goods are going to be really expensive in your less productive countries. So in Spain, it's really just going through this, I suppose it's a productivity-led crisis where their level of productivity is not up to the average of the European Union, or of the Eurozone rather. So we've got prices which are really high relative to other countries. It's just not competitive to produce here. And I think that's the one problem which is evident, in the sense that there's very few jobs available. When you read about high unemployment, that's one of the big things we're looking at. The fact that companies just can't be competitive here, competing against other more competitive countries within the same currency zone. That's the one side. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Well, that's the one side of the crisis. And then the other side of the crisis, I think, that you can look at, which is rampant in Southern Europe, although I think it inflicts most European countries in general, maybe most economies of the world in general, is we've got a real government spending problem going on here. So the government budget the amount of debt we've got in Spain and the ongoing deficits year after year are just stifling the country under interest payments, and the country can't get back on its feet.
Yeah. Was the euro doomed from the very start, in your opinion?
I don't think I've changed
Or was the
my
system they set up, was it sort of doomed the way they've set it all up, just as you just explained, with trying to lump all these different economies into one economy?
You know, I think about this often. I've changed my views a little bit since I've lived here. Originally, I thought it was doomed from the start. Now I think it's got its benefits, but it's got a learning curve as well. So I think the big thing is when the Eurozone was originally formed, we needed some productivity changes across the board, and we needed some price changes across the board as well. And one of the problems that we had if you look at Spain today, why it's so uncompetitive is businesses can't come down here and produce something for export at a price which is competitive with Germany, let's say, because we all use the same currency. And you could always say, well, if that's a problem for Spain, if it can't compete on the currency level, it could compete by just dropping its prices domestically, right? If we had a good dose of deflation over here and you drop prices down, so let's say wages decrease and input costs on the whole decrease, then that would make it cheaper to produce in Spain. And even on the same currency, it could be competitive on an international scheme. And the problem is prices are just not dropping. So there's a whole range of prices, of input prices here in Spain, and wages might be part of it, that are just not dropping to make it competitive with some of these other European countries. Now, over time, I think it is becoming more competitive. I think one of the big problems in these countries, and actually it does relate to the riots that you'll see on the streets, is you've got, when you talk about input prices and input costs, wages are a big one. And in Spain, you've got, like in most of Southern Europe, huge government sectors that are highly resistant to pay cuts, even in the face of a crisis. You see this in the States. You see it in Canada as well, right? So there's all these public sector workers who go on strike to avoid pay cuts, and it's really hard to get those wages to start coming down. It's a slow process and it's happening, but it's not happening quickly enough to get out of this crisis, at least not yet. So
What's your best? I'll go ahead.
Well, in its present form, I'd say things will get better eventually. It's just that domestic prices here in Spain and other periphery European countries need to drop, and they're slowly doing it, and they're doing it faster in some countries than others. Like in Spain, I'd say it's happening better than in, say, for example, Greece or Italy. But it's a timely process to get these concessions.
So what's your best guess for the next few years as to what's going to be happening in the Eurozone with the European Central Bank and all the government debt problems? What's your general outlook?
I think it'll be a combination of the ECB expanding the money supply to buy up some of this government debt, the same thing that has been going on for the past couple of years. And on the other hand, I fully expect that the German government, and when I say Germany, I mean the strong core of Europe, which is getting smaller by the day, but let's say the Netherlands and Germany and Austria, will increasingly give unilateral transfers over to the troubled countries of the periphery to try to keep them afloat for a while longer. If you think about it, it's actually, the way that it's going in the short run anyway, it's advantageous for countries like Germany just to pay a cost up front in order to keep this game going a little while longer. Germany exports a lot of goods to these countries. It has to finance them to do it, right? So it gives them loans so that they can buy German goods. Germany continues the status quo with the currency union, and the currency union works pretty well again for Germany because if you think about the value of the euro, it's an average of all of these countries, and some of them are basket cases, and some of them are really strong. So let's say the average is for a median country, and Germany does pretty well with a currency that's valued for one of these median countries. It's very productive for that, and that's why it's easy for Germany to export to the rest of the world. But if you had some of these basket case countries leave, all of a sudden Germany would have to cope with a stronger euro, and I don't think German exporters want that right now.
Yeah, the exporters always want it to be a little cheaper, the currency, of course. And but you say keep this game going a little while longer. What is the end game of all this? What is there going to be a real serious collapse at some point?
I think the end game is that, let's say, the core of Europe and Germany keeps it going a little while longer, and then people finally get tired of these unilateral transfers to keep it going. So when you think about it, the story that I've just told you, the complete one, is that Spain and the rest of the periphery could get out of crisis if they just take some wage cuts here, if prices start to fall on the periphery of Europe. And Germany doesn't want to let that happen right now because they're scared. They're scared about the periphery collapsing and then potentially leaving the Eurozone. So Germany gives transfer payments over to the periphery to keep them in the game. But every time they give a transfer payment, it's basically a bailout that negates the necessity of doing price cuts. Right? We've got an unsustainable situation, then Germany just continues bailing it out. So as long as Germany keeps doing that, prices don't have to fall on the periphery, and the periphery never recovers. And the end game is eventually Germans and Europeans from the core, they're going to wise up to the fact that it's a perpetual crisis. Right? Every time they try to save it, it gets worse and worse. So I think the end game is eventually the transfer payments are going to dry up. The crisis is going to escalate even further, if you can believe that. That's when the riots will really intensify, and from there, I think the end game is the Eurozone collapses.
Yeah, I think so as well. A lot of people say about Europe that it's a very socialist, sort of almost communist thinking. A lot of people in that area, in that region. You're from Canada originally, so you've seen more of the Canadian-U.S. Style of people, which are also turning quite socialist now. In your opinion, are the people in Europe more socialist than in the U.S. or Canada?
There's a tendency for that. In part, depending on the country that you're looking at, government sector can be fairly large. Here in Spain, you're looking at 40 to 50% of the economy is government sector. I think in Greece, it's closer to 60%. As opposed to, I don't know, in America, it might be 25% today. In Canada, if you threw in all the provincial governments, might be, I don't know, a third, something like that. There's many services here which have always, and I'm going to generalize in Europe, it doesn't hold true for all the countries, but there's a lot of services which have just always been socialized, so they never come to be questioned. So healthcare, I guess, is a big one that Americans could identify with. Smaller ones, I think, that are more damaging because people are used to it right from birth, or maybe, universal daycare, for example, programs like that, just an extension of the whole universal education system. So people are almost bred to understand this ideology, or to agree with this ideology and this state of affairs almost from birth. You instantly go in the system. In that sense, I think it's a little bit different. It's also, and this is one that increasingly I think is true, although I don't have firm evidence for it. In Europe, and I'll just focus on Spain, for example, it's highly bureaucratic and it's hard to start a business. You don't have small businessmen or women. You don't have, small business is not the engine of growth. The engine of growth in this country is, well, there's not really any growth going on, so I guess you could start with it from that point, but is large established corporations that seem to dominate, a very few are dominating the economic landscape. And people, when they grow up, they have this attitude that if you want to be a success when you grow up, you either get a government job and be safe for life, or you go and work for one of the big corporations and be safe for life, or that's it. And nobody says, I want to grow up and be an entrepreneur. And this is fundamentally different than in Canada or the States, where you do have this mentality. And I think one of the reasons is it's just so bureaucratic that to cut through all the red tape and to meet all the requirements, it's a full-time job in itself. And most small businessmen and women don't have the time for it. So you can't have small businesses just springing up everywhere like you could in the States or in Canada still. In Europe, it's more or less just large companies that have big legal departments, big accounting departments that can deal with all the bureaucracy and red tape. So that's all you get for, and then that's all anybody ever strives for.
Yeah, recently the founder of Subway restaurants, which he founded in the 1960s, I didn't actually realize that, recently came out and said that in the U.S. now today, he could never have founded Subway because of all the regulations and rules and taxes. And so it's quite sad that now the U.S. is very much headed. U.S. is very much like Europe, in my opinion, right now. It's headed definitely in that direction. It's unfortunate. One of the things that I should have brought up at the top of the conversation for people who don't understand Austrian economics is I like to say that Austrian economics is basically anarchist economics. And but how would you say to someone who doesn't know what Austrian economics is, what it is?
Yeah, I think that's a good first approximation, but I think that derives from more of a general position that its focus is realism. In most of mainstream econ today, the focus is on formal modeling, having something that looks theoretically beautiful, and it's abstracted from reality, so its actual applicability doesn't really matter all that much. To give you maybe a good example, it's maybe endemic in most of academia, but especially in mainstream economics. The emphasis is never on relevance, but the emphasis is on the emphasis is maybe on logical completeness, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't apply to anything. And I think that describes most economic models that I look at, most mainstream economic models. They make some logical sense given the extreme assumptions that they're bound by, and given the very irrelevant situations that they're applied to. And in Austrian econ, we focus more on relevance, or we start from a position where here's a problem, an actual problem, what are the actual facts that describe it, and then work through the logic of the situation that way. And you have in some cases some results that are drastically different. Sometimes the results are the same, but the problem that you're always describing is real. And the application is real. And I think for me, that's the big difference is we talk about things that actually matter to people, and we use the real world constraints. We don't imagine up assumptions or scenarios that don't seem indicative of reality.
And there at the St. Louis University, you're with Jesus Huerto de Soto, and yourself. Is the entire faculty of economics there, mostly Austrian economics people?
Well, actually, just to correct you on that, Jesus Huerta de Soto, who I did my PhD with, he's at the University Rey Juan Carlos here in Madrid, which is a large, well-known university here. It's where I came to do my PhD. And then St. Louis University is it's actually a private American university here with a campus in Madrid, where I'm actually the only explicit Austrian on the faculty. Over in Rey Juan Carlos, there is, within the department of applied economics, there is a section which is 100% Austrian as well. In fact, the graduate program is 100% Austrian over there.
That's fantastic, and I know many people have gone over there to study because of that. So that's for all the younger people, or even if you're older, for people who want to keep learning about economics, I would highly recommend that you look at going there, or Ludwig von Mises Institute in Alabama are all teaching Austrian economics, and I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, it's like I say, I came here specifically for the program. I wasn't disappointed. Spain's a lovely place as well. You can probably relate in Mexico, despite what you see in the news. These are lovely places to live on the ground, and it's a fantastic experience all around.
Yeah, I've been to Madrid, and it's definitely a beautiful city. And so for all the people out there who want to study economics, there's some good options for you. So I'd like to thank David Howden for being on with us. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Jeff. My pleasure.
And so that's another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.